You will own nothing and be happy. You will own nothing and be happy. I'm sure you've heard this sentence a lot of times over the past few years, especially from the beginning of the pandemic period. This phrase begins to be, said everywhere, through the World Economic Forum. They were the first ones to make this sentence public. And since then, everyone says it. But what does this really mean? It's been painted as like this future that is a utopia, a future that is bright and amazing, and everyone will live together in happiness and things will be great. But is that what it really means? And what does that actually mean for our finances? Stay tuned to find out. Hello and welcome. My name is Oluwatoni Uyemi. I'm the founder of Swiss Money Coach based here in Basel, Switzerland. On this channel, we help people with personal finance, business strategy, wherever you are, investment tips. Whether you're an African living in Africa or you're African living overseas or you're European, doesn't really matter. Our content can be very resourceful and useful to anyone, who needs help with finances. So let's talk about this phrase, you owe nothing and be happy. It has become very popularized over the past 2 to 3 years, from the World Economic Forum, the WEF, using it quite a lot in what they've said their 10 projections for the year 2030, which we are not so far off from anymore, And you hear lots of people say this on TV, you hear lots of people write about it, and even here on YouTube. It's become like a catchy slang for globalists, for people who are looking towards a more utopia kind of future, but also for those who believe in conspiracy theories or those who think that the future is going to be gloom and doom. Everyone uses it in some form of phrase, but not a lot of people are thinking about what that means for their finances and what that means for you as an individual. Let's talk about this concept of owning nothing and versus owning everything or owning something. You see, private ownership is the key to wealth. In fact, private ownership is the only key to wealth. It's the only way you can actually be wealthy. You can have everything. You can rent a fantastic car. You can rent a mansion. You can rent any services, private jets. But if you don't own it, you are paying for somebody else to be wealthy. You are not wealthy. Let's talk about some statistics just to showcase this thing. Because private ownership has been on a huge decline, a very steep decline in the last 20 to 30 years. And it has accelerated even more in the last 10 to 15 years. And I will anticipate and I forecast that private ownership of goods, of houses, of resources, of services will continue to decline at a much faster rate, especially in the developed world. We're not talking of like in Africa, for example, or in Asia. Those places are still a bit behind in this trend. But in the developed world, where things are becoming more and more expensive, the rate of ownership is going to keep dropping. It's been dropping drastically and it's going to continue to drop. Take a look at Canada, for example. Home ownership rates, they are very low. Property prices have jumped through the roof. People are struggling to own their houses. Same with the United States. A study came out this week that shows that for the first time since the 1990s, buying a home is 52% more expensive than renting. So you can save 50% more of your wealth by renting than buying. And this is intentional. This is done intentionally to ensure that people like you and I don't actually own anything. Because when you don't own anything, you will not be wealthy. And the idea that not owning anything will lead to happiness, because for them, what the phrase just means, things will be more convenient. If you want something, you rent it. But renting is not the same as ownership. Having access to a thing is not the same as being wealthy or owning a thing. You see, the difference between capitalism and communism or socialism is private ownership. If you do not have control over your own resources, if you do not own the things that you want, the place where you live, the clothes on your body, the devices you use, then you are not wealthy at all and you cannot build wealth. In fact, You can't do anything. You're just a person and you could lose everything. The only thing you have for yourself then is just your physical body. For example, in Australia, home ownership has been declining drastically as well. And let's talk about Switzerland, where I'm based. When you live overseas and you think of Switzerland, you say, oh, it's a very wealthy country. Everybody wants to live here. It's beautiful. And yes, I agree. It's a beautiful country. It's very well developed. It's wealthy. But do you know that only about 40% of people actually live in a home that they have a mortgage on, right? That they own. Only 40%. We have the lowest rate of home ownership in Europe, one of the lowest in the world. But out of that 40%, how many of them actually own the home? It's a shocking statistics of just 4%. Just 4% of people living in Switzerland actually own their home free and clear. That means it's paid off, there's no mortgage and there's no loan. Let me say that again. 4%. 4%. That is mind-blowing. So while we live in a wealthy country, we live in a place where everybody has Teslas or drives expensive cars, has a high income, whatever, people don't actually own things. They don't own the roof over their head. So the question is, are they actually wealthy? If you think of Asia, if you think of Africa, where yes, they say we are developing or underdeveloped or whatever, yet the rate of ownership is drastically higher in those countries and in those continents than in Europe. Drastically higher. So I will invite you to rethink what wealth really is about. This principle of owning nothing and that you own nothing and be happy is an agenda that is done intentionally to make everyone poor, to make everyone lose the ability to build wealth, and to make you 100% dependent on the system, dependent on the government. Look at it. Today, you don't even own your social media. You can have Instagram, you could have Facebook, you could have YouTube. This video I'm making, if YouTube is not happy about it, they can take it down. So I don't even own the content I have created and put on this platform. You don't own your social media. You don't own the data you've put on online. It doesn't belong to you. The question is, do you own your own home? You may think those other countries, Africa, Asia, South America, you may call them poor. But are they really poor if people own more things? If people actually have wealth? Debt-free. Here in the West, most people are slaves to debt. If they lose their job and they can't keep up with their payments, they lose everything. Everything. The cars are leased. The houses are mortgaged. Their cell phones are leased or they are paying monthly for it to own it someday. And there's even a rise in service-based economy where everything is you rent it to use and you return. Everything is about rent and you return, rent and you return. Convenience. It's all being packaged with the wrapping paper of convenience. But convenience is the theft to wealth. It's the theft to real wealth. Do not pursue convenience. Pursue ownership, because ownership is the key to wealth. If you don't own it, you are not wealthy. If you don't own your own home, if you don't own your own house, your own car, your own cell phone, your own electricity, whatever it could be, you are not wealthy. So I want you to rethink this concept of own nothing and be happy, especially since it's an agenda that is being pushed forward, which means many countries are going to be intentionally driving it. Investment funds are buying up single family homes and apartments. Everything is being bought up by the big investment companies. And someday in our lifetime, you would very rarely come across a person who owns the house or the apartment they live in. Are they wealthy? If they die, what do they pass along to their family? Nothing. Just say goodbye to generational wealth. Because if you don't own it, you can't pass it down. Which means when you die, your family resets from beginning again. That is the greatest form of slavery. The loss of private ownership is the greatest form of slavery. Don't fall for this trap. Don't fall for it. Wherever you can, make sure you have control as much as possible over your food, your house, your clothing, your internet, the basic things you need, water. That's why I'm a big proponent of people who move out to the countryside to live off grid. Or you don't have to live off the grid and become isolated from society, but at least to have some form of independence, where you buy a property where you can live there, you can grow your own food, you can raise your own kids your own way. Because people don't even own their kids anymore. The state owns their kids now. So think very hard about this. Do you own the things you brag about? Do you own the things that you think you do own? Do you own them for real, or is it an illusion? Is your ownership an illusion or a reality? These are the key things you need to understand. Ownership is the only key to wealth. If you don't own it, you are not wealthy. So don't be envious of people who have big mansions but don't own it. Don't be envious of people who fly in private jets but don't own it. Don't be envious of people who drive really nice cars but don't own it, because they are poor. If you have the clothes, if you own the clothes on your body, you own the house you live in, you own the car you drive, you control your food, you're wealthy. You are very wealthy. And in the future, in the coming decades, only those that own their properties, their food, have control over their food, their water, their electricity, their clothing, those are the people that will be wealthy. The world is changing. Make sure you pay attention. Things are changing drastically. Pay attention, observe, and act accordingly. Make sure private ownership is your sole goal, the one thing you pursue after. Don't buy into the illusion, because the same people who tell you you own nothing and be happy are the same people that build the companies that buy up all these properties and buy up all these resources, then lease it out to you. That's unlimited wealth for them. Because for them, the more people that rent their services or their products, the wealthier they become. Then they have a permanent hand in your pocket. And every month as your paycheck comes in, their cut goes into it. Their cut goes out, goes into their pocket. That's the trick they're using to make people poor. And they sell it to us in the name of convenience. Don't fall for this trap. Don't buy into this fool's gold. Own your own stuff. Own it. Thank you.